Hi guys, today's lesson is going to be on the Affluent Society, America in the 1950s and the wealth that it creates. We're going to start off with kind of the new normalcy, the new normal for America and the new American dream. Conformity is seen as the new normal. They want everyone to look the same, act the same, and have the same ideals. This is partially because of the upheaval of World War II, but largely because of the fear of communist infiltration. If everybody looks the same, acts the same, etc., whoever doesn't fulfill those ideals must be someone to be suspicious of, must be someone to keep your eye on. They saw conformity as a sign of unity. And this new conformity is going to be part of the new American dream. Everybody does want to look the same, does want to act the same. They want to have the house with the white picket fence and the Buick in the driveway and the dog named Spot. That American dream that we all kind of think of today actually was created in the post-war world in the 1950s. And one of the biggest parts of this is the nuclear family. Now, this goes along with, yes, the idea of the atomic nuclear in the sense that we are in kind of this atomic age, but it's also nuclear is in the central core family, mother and father who are married and their biological children. Having multiple children was also seen as beneficial because having lots of kids showed that you had a strong marriage and thus you were a strong family. This is an ideal, but not necessarily reality, and we will look at why in just a moment. So, America's affluence in many ways is absolutely accurate. The average income triples between 1940 and 1960. We also have an incredible increase in the number of people who own homes due to the GI Bill, which I'll discuss in just a moment. And we also see America move more to white-collar jobs and service jobs, which generally tend to require more education and thus pay better than blue-collar and manufacturing jobs. However, over 30 million Americans were still living in poverty, most of which were minorities. And a large part of this was in response to something that was a phenomenon known as white flight, which is where whites were moving to the suburbs in order to get away from the rising number of minorities living in the cities. However, when the whites moved out of the cities, this now creates a void of tax dollars in the cities, which causes problems with not enough housing and also not enough money for education, etc. So the idea of affluence is maybe not absolutely 100% accurate. We're going to briefly look at the presidents of the 1950s, and the first we look at is President Truman. He had some issues with labor unions after World War II because all of those non-strike deals under the National Labor Board had now expired. So they were going on strikes, demanding more wages, and this made a lot of people in Congress very nervous because they saw unions as a breeding ground for communism. Remember that workers are generally supposed to be favored under communism, and labor unions try to help workers. So they saw that connection and they saw this as being dangerous, and so they severely restricted the activities and power of labor unions. Specific ways of striking that they were no longer allowed to do. They eliminated the closed shop and things like this. Although Truman vetoed it, it was later overridden by Congress and passed into law anyway. Now, a couple good things that happened under Truman. First of all, is the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, also known as the GI Bill. This gave cheap mortgages to returning GIs. It gave them loans to open businesses as well as tuition to go to vocational school or to college. This allows them to get better jobs with better money, which is going to make them stronger Americans overall in our society. We also have another change for the military with Executive Order 9981. 9981 abolished discrimination within the military, which very quickly is going to lead to the desegregation of the armed services. And this is kind of connected to Truman's Fair Deal, where he was trying to create a fair deal for all Americans. He wanted all Americans, regardless of their gender or race or economic position, to have an equal opportunity in America. Now you see all of these different things that he attempted to do in this fair deal. And yet during his administration, only these three are actually going to be passed. Now, these four are actually going to be passed later on under the administration of Lyndon Johnson. And one is going to be passed very recently, and that is universal health insurance, passed under Barack Obama just a couple of years ago. So, although many people do call it Obamacare, it really should be attributed more to Truman, who came up with it back in the 1940s, early 1950s. Now, Truman is not going to be nominated in 1952, largely because of the failure of the war in Korea. Eisenhower is going to come in with the promise that he's going to get us out of Korea. And he sweeps the election for many reasons, but as you can see from the map here, it truly was just a landslide victory. He chooses as his running mate Senator Richard Nixon from California, right here in Yorba Linda. And he does get Eisenhower into a little bit of hot water because Nixon was accused of misusing campaign funds. To get ahead of this and to get ahead of the media, he decides he's going to go on television, and Nixon tells the American public that he is not a crook, if you ever remember hearing that phrase before. But he says, I did not steal any campaign funds, but I refuse to give back one of the gifts that was given to me, and that is a dog named Checkers, who my children love. And of course, this is to misdirect the public and the media from the real issue, which becomes kind of a standard within politics today. And so this is famously known, or maybe infamously known, as the Checkers speech. Eisenhower is going to return to conservative republicanism, which I'll discuss in just a moment. And due to his successes in 52, as well as his very catchy TV campaign ads, which are linked down below the video here, he wins in another landslide, an even bigger landslide, in 1956. So what does Eisenhower's new republicanism look like? A lot like the 1920s. It's still very pro-business. They go away from social programs of FDR, very similar to the Republicans from the 20s, moving away from progressivism. There was modest tax reductions, though most Republicans after him would have larger tax reductions to draw in wealthier Americans. But one of the biggest things that is known for these new conservatives is that they are severely anti-communist. They are commie hunters, and they will do everything they can to root them out of American society. The other thing that Eisenhower is very well known for is the increase in military spending. Lots of money spent on nukes and that military-industrial complex. So I know this doesn't look like it matches for some reason, but it will make sense in just a second. In the 1950s, we were going to have a huge change to our car culture, and that is because of a post-war automobile boom. Materials are no longer rationed. Cars get bigger, they get flashier, they have fins that serve no purpose other than looking cool. They have flashy colors because they're not being rationed. They have fuzzy dice in the mirror for no purpose other than they look cool. There's a lot of things that are done just because we have the money to do so now. And we become absolutely obsessed with our cars, which leads to a new desire for driving-related businesses like the first drive-in movie theater, as well as the drive-thru, because we can't seem to be bothered to get out of our cars to watch a movie or to eat food. Now, this is where it links back to Eisenhower. He passes the Federal Highway Act, which authorizes the construction of the interstate highway system. Over 40,000 miles of interstate highway are going to be constructed. Now, the purpose originally is to allow military vehicles to move quickly across the country in the case of a national emergency, if we did get nuked by the Russians. However, this is going to vastly change the culture of Americans and the way that they drive and travel. Just a little fun fact for you, if you are driving the interstate highway, all of the even-numbered highways go east to west, and all of the odd ones go north to south. Now, this does not include the intrastate highways like the California 91 that we all love and adore so much. Those go every which way, but the interstates were very, very well structured, and this was done actually as a model from the German Autobahn. So how did we get across the country before this was done? Well, the main way was on Route 66. This was the main way for the people going across on the Dust Bowl. And because this was really the main way to get across America, there were entire economies that were supported solely by travel on Route 66. And there were neat little restaurants and kitschy little places along the road that you could stop at. And these are some of those that you might have seen. The first drive-in theater in America in Carthage, Missouri, or the Wigwam Motel in Flagstaff, Arizona, or the Shamrock gas station in Shamrock, Texas, which doesn't look exactly all that exciting, but it is the location of the Route 66 Museum today. Now, you might be looking at these and going, wait, those look really familiar. They look like they're from the movie Cars. Yes, this movie was based on Route 66 and the negative effect that it had, or rather the Interstate Highway Act had on Route 66 and on the economies of the towns along the way. And all of the cars that are in that movie are based off of actual cars from the 1950s. It's like those little towns got stuck in time because they got bypassed by the interstate. So we're going to look at American business now and what causes this affluence. Part of this is going to be due to the franchise, which is similar to a chain store. A chain store is where you have multiple locations of the same store, like Miguel's Jr. But a franchise is bigger than that. It is huge. It is national and sometimes international. And it's too big for one family or one person to run all of them and make sure they're running well. So what they do is they rent their trademark out to people who want to be a part of this very successful company. So you can open your own McDonald's and they send you all the stuff to open the McDonald's based off of this, rent that you pay. It allowed for uniformity and consistency as you traveled across America. You know what you can expect from a McDonald's. The other thing that we're going to see is the influence of the business on the American male. The organization man or the company man was a description for men who were completely and totally dedicated to their company, which was very well illustrated by the book, which was very quickly turned into a movie called The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. The gray flannel suit seemed to be kind of the unofficial uniform of the 1950s businessman, and their entire reputation and self-worth seemed to be attached to their workplace. However, what the book and movie do illustrate is that they were not always necessarily happy with this, and that many times felt unfulfilled. So, lastly, with this idea of affluence is post-war consumerism. Consumerism is, again, a flashback to the 1920s. The idea that we now need to keep up with the Joneses and have what our neighbors have and be better than they are. Part of this is going to be supported by an idea called Fordism, based off of Henry Ford's idea of mass production and having tons of materials at your disposal at all times. This is going to lead to consumerism. We're also going to have the introduction of the very first actual credit card, which was the Diners Club card. Very quickly afterwards, we will have more credit cards introduced, but this was the very first one. We have more affluence, we have more wealth, and thus we are able to buy more luxury items. Not necessarily because we need them, but just because they're available. Betty down the street got a brand new refrigerator, so her husband must love her more than you do love me. So it's this idea that you always have to do as well as your neighbors. Lots of household items that were supposed to make your life easier and faster didn't always necessarily do that, but it definitely was something that was going to make you feel better about your lifestyle. The other things that we're going to see at this time is that we are influenced by television and print advertising. The television show Mad Men and about the advertising men of the 50s is really pretty accurate as far as the amount of influence and power and also the way that they manipulated people into buying things. Two of these cartoons that were very, advertisements that were very popular, one is a cartoon and one has a cartoon-like figure, are linked below, and you can kind of see these and see how they use popular ideas like the space race and catchy jingles to get people's attention. So these are some ideas that lead us for affluence in America in the 50s, how it's true and also sometimes not really all that true. Some of it is very much a facade, but it made us feel strong and powerful as a nation. So that's it for today. Thanks so much.